So I recently saw a video where a woman said she will tolerate nothing in her life that feels like abuse to her, and this is one of the most brilliant things I've ever heard. Mind you, of course, her comment section was going absolutely ballistic with questions like, if it just is your subjective feeling, that doesn't make it abuse, or, well, how would you know it's abuse? What if you're traumatized? What if you're not able to effectively perceive your reality, etc., etc. But I want to talk about why this is such a genius way to operate in the world and how more people should do this. So let's just begin, unusually for me, with the bad faith inquisition. Let's say I decide that anything that feels like abuse to me is a situation, a person, a job, whatever, that I will leave. And let's say, for the sake of these devil's advocates, that I am wrong about this, right? That I am miscategorizing an experience that I'm having as abuse when it's not. The fact of the matter is, whether it is or it's not abuse doesn't matter when we're having a reaction. And honestly, what that means is if I'm perceiving a banal or a benign interaction as abuse, I shouldn't be in that position. I am not healed enough, I am not regulated enough to be in that space. It is still, in fact, the right choice to leave a situation that feels like abuse, even if it's not, because I'm going to react as if it is anyway. I feel like this platform has an obsession with legitimacy that really bothers me. We forget that things can be real without necessarily being true. And I'm much more interested in the things that are real than the truth of it all, because at the end of the day, we're all subjective people. But this is super interesting to me because if, regardless of the truth of the matter, if I'm so dysregulated in my nervous system that I'm perceiving danger and threat and abuse from things that are in fact not abusive, the solution wouldn't be to stay there. The solution wouldn't be to doubt and gaslight myself. The solution would be to step away from that situation and give myself room to better evaluate myself and what's going on around me. But this isn't what happens the majority of the time. I don't believe that most people are mischaracterizing abuse. I believe it's the opposite. I believe that most of us have become so accustomed to the ongoing abuses that play out in our job, our life, our friendships, and our relationships that we're actually not good at spotting it when it happens. And I think this ideology is particularly threatening for people who hold power, be it certain types of men in relationships, employers, etc. Because if we decide to leave when something feels like abuse, that means that there's no control the person in power has over our narrative anymore. They can't tell us that we're wrong. They can't warp our worldview because they can't challenge what we feel. There's no semantic debate when you're talking about a somatic response, an emotional response. And I think this scares people because the idea of us exercising our autonomy from a place of emotion means that we are fully in a righteous decision-making place that can't be negotiated with by others. And I think for folks who have struggled with self-trust and people-pleasing, this is a really liberatory practice. We're often feeling like we need a 6-page dissertation on why we feel a certain way, if it's right, if we have the right to say no, if it's coming from the correct place, if we've perceived the situation correctly before we can make a decision. Even to ourselves, we require this incredibly high level of justification. And so to say, if I feel a certain way, I'm going to respond a certain way without having to fact check it, allows us the space to know that we're going to take care of ourselves and our feelings and our reactions, regardless of whether it lines up with the truth-telling abacus of the people around us. I think ultimately this gives people a sense of power in their lives that they don't otherwise have, and the ability to rely on ourselves regardless of whether or not our reality, our perception of events has to be objectively validated by ourselves or by others. Imagine how much safer we would all feel in ourselves, in our relationships, in our decision-making, in our lives, if we could know for a fact, if I feel a certain way, I will rely on myself to do this. I will not second-guess myself. I will not require proof or evidence. I will do this. And then once I have made that decision, once I have decided to step away, I will assess the situation afterwards from a point of safety, from a point of hopefully support and connection. So much damage is done by us trying to stay in places that we are not supposed to be, to conform to environments that do not have space for us. So much resent and pain and passive aggression and trauma plays out when we try to ignore our feelings and pretend that we are objective thinking creatures and not feeling creatures. There's an enormous amount of wisdom in what this woman said. If I feel abused, then I will leave. And I think this is something that we could all really learn from.